Welcome back to another episode of Words That Kill. And today we are discussing Choose Your Weapon. And we have with us as our guest author, Pierre Arseneault. And I'll turn it over to him now and let him introduce himself. So take it away.
Yeah, Pierre Arseneault. I'm from New Brunswick, born and raised, lived here pretty much all my life. Haven't really traveled all that much. I'm a purebred maritimer. So yeah, and I started writing late in life. Just wanted to tell stories, always wanted to do it, and I just started writing later in life. Got 5 books published so far, a couple more in the can waiting to be, and a few projects going on, and it's just too much fun.
Well, that's good. and for our American viewers, New Brunswick is in Canada, right next to Nova Scotia, where I am. So
very true.
And so we'll start off with the basic question on how do you craft your killers? How do you choose your weapon? Is it based on the character personality? Is it or is it by situation, scene, murders?
You pretty much got the right answer on towards the end there, because you can't choose a weapon without knowing why you're killing the person in the first place. So the why comes in first. Is it because the character wants to enact revenge? If yes, do they want it to be public, or do they want to get away with it? Do they want to not have the person know that they did it? Like, what's the motive? You almost have to have that before you can even go any further. Because, I mean, nobody's going to shoot somebody if they want it to look like an accident. I always find that part quite interesting, because crafting a death scene, or choosing your murder weapon, all depends on the why. So when you're approaching it, the perspective of the killer, if they want to get away with it, you can't have it be an obvious murder. So,
well, that's too true.
Yeah.
But so, and you're basically saying you tailor the death scene to the weapon, or the weapon to the death scene, whatever order it comes in. So do you alter the scenes? Like if you're using a gun, or is it more like there's creeping around in the shadows? Or if you're using a knife, is it up close and personal? How does that work?
It's going to depend on the circumstance, because if it's a crime of passion, most of the time it's whatever's handy, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to be pre-planning, but it's a crime of passion. You're not going to have that gun on you, or necessarily, unless it's a person who carries one, unless it's a mobster, you've got a police officer, a career criminal, or something like that carries normally weaponry. Unless it's something like that. And I've written mostly horror, so I've got your monsters killing and different things, and paranormal, but it depends on where you're going and how you're going about it. I do find certain things quite interesting, like crimes of opportunity. The axe with the lumberjack has handy, or whatever happens to be the case.
Okay, so mixing the questions up a little bit, going into from that, what's the weirdest thing you've ever used to kill a character?
Weirdest things is an intricately carved lamp. There was a scene, which again becomes a crime of passion. This character had gotten a lamp as a gift, and I don't want to give away too much, but it was an intricately carved wooden lamp. And the person ended up breaking it and using a shard of it as a murder weapon. Interesting. And when you read the story, it's in my my book, Poplar Falls, The Deaths of Charlie Baker. When you read that, that's my first and only dark comedy so far. It's really dark, and it's comedy though, so it's quite different. But that was a crime of passion. So that was just a moment, and I'm giving away too much in a way if you're going to read the book. But hey, there's going to be that moment where if you're listening to this interview before reading the book, you'll have that little seed ahead of time.
When you're crafting a death scene, you're killing a character, and you've chosen your weapon, and you're ready to kill them. So how do you build the tension between weapons? Like if you're using a knife, I would think the tension is a lot more intimate, if that's the right word.
Yeah, it definitely would be. But again, why is the murder? See, I know I keep going back to that, but I can think of an example that I used once that this one was written in collaboration with a friend of mine, where we killed a couple people with an axe. But that was a crime of passion, and it was brought on by some kind of paranormal activity kind of thing that just riled up the character and did that. And there's other scenes where people would die almost accidentally, but being brought on by something like that. And there's various ways to do it, and depending on the circumstances. If you're talking just basic serial killer, somebody going out, it's very intriguing to try to come up with something that's going to be different, you know, like murder weapon wise or something. But are you just being gimmicky when you're doing that? It's kind of like watching a zombie show where everybody's got a weird gimmick weapon. You know, it's fun, but it can kind of get a little weird and gimmicky after a while. You kind of want to get away from that. You kind of want it to be a little bit more subtle, I find.
Okay, so you touched on using paranormal in the books. So is using a paranormal creature as a weapon part of what you do?
It definitely has been done, yeah. See, I'm trying to write not sticking to the same genre all the time, but if you look at, I'm trying to remember the name of the story. It's called Soulmates. It's in Dark Tales for Dark Nights, written in collaboration with Angela Cormier. That book is a story called Soulmates, where these people end up in this haunted house, and yes, deaths are caused by paranormal, and it's really, we didn't go out to just murder people, right? It was kind of a paranormal activity situation where it wasn't really meant to harm, but it does. So that's why I'm saying, like, when you go out to kill a character, sometimes you don't go out to just senselessly kill a character. Sometimes the death comes in a way that you might not have anticipated.
Did you get a little creative with those, like kind of like Final Destination sort of creative, or? Oh,
definitely. In that story, it's basically about a haunting and a chance encounter kind of thing. I don't want to give it too much away. There's a variety of stories. Weirdest weapon, to go back to that. I know one of the, because you had mentioned weirdest weapon. Another thing that I used once was a bag of canned goods. Again, kind of a crime of opportunity. It was a bizarre scene in a story called Subliminal. And there's a reason that the used bag of canned goods is crime of opportunity. It's kind of whatever's nearest kind of thing. So that one was one of my most interesting as well. It's, some of those from the earlier stories.
Yeah, I can see a bag of canned goods being a good bludgeoning weapon. All right, those things.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It leaves a bit of a mess.
I hope it wasn't one of those little flimsy grocery bags, though.
I never really put much thought into the bag itself, I guess. I'm not the most descriptive writer. I try to leave you a little bit of room to imagine.
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure how those little flimsy grocery bags would stand up to being a bludgeoning weapon, but
you're very right.
Well,
I have some fabric bags that would work pretty good.
Yeah.
The right amount of canned peas or something. Yeah, might get a little nasty.
Okay, so that leads us into the violence levels. So how violent have you gone with the various weaponry and
Oh. It goes from mild to extreme. That's why I was saying, like, the bag of canned goods scene was the frosty mug scene in the same story. It's pretty brutal. Yeah, that's the same story. That's pretty brutal and pretty bloody.
Okay, yeah, that's a teaser right there. The frosty mug scene.
Yes, in the story Subliminal and in a book called Sleepless Nights. Yeah, it leaves a bit of a mess. One of my favorites would be the axe scene in Oakwood Island, The Awakening, which I wrote with Angela Cormier. That axe scene is pretty disturbing, but once you get past it, you understand why it happened and how. And so again, that's a more of a supernatural book with a lot of paranormal elements and different things.
what are your favorite research sites, and what have you had to look up in these sites?
Interestingly enough, probably the best research site is YouTube. You can find a lot of stuff on YouTube. And one of the most interesting things I had to research for the last book I just wrote, which is meant to be a drama, but it's still going to be a little dark. I researched a lot of shotguns because I'm not really, an expert in firearms, and I don't want to be one in writing. But I needed to understand a little bit more about shotguns, and you can find some pretty interesting videos out there of people trying all kinds of bizarre things. And if you want to understand the difference between rock salt, bird shot, a slug, it's interesting to start doing some research. And there's people out there more than willing to shoot things.
Yeah. I had to do some gun research myself. It was it was on the Victorian era weaponry, and you can find a lot of reenactment videos and research historical guns on YouTube as well. Yeah, I agree. YouTube's a good site for research.
I agree with that, because you'll find anybody willing to shoot something or blow something up or do something like that, and it's quite dangerous. I can't imagine a lot of these people not injuring themselves, but obviously probably the videos of them injuring themselves probably don't make it online. So you're usually safe in watching a video. You usually figure nobody's going to hurt themselves. But there's some fascinating stuff.
Well, hopefully some of it's editing too, and they're just, making
Very
it look
true.
more dangerous than it is.
Very true. The interesting part about some of those videos, you'll watch people that have like actual gelatin. They've made the gelatin and they're shooting the buckshot into it and showing the difference. And some of them will get quite creative with like a side of beef, ribs, actual ribs, and they'll put like cloth over it to mimic clothing, and they want to mimic what it would be to actually shoot somebody. That's disturbing to watch. But there's a lot of research out there you can do.
Yeah, there's a lot of historical research on swords and archery and stuff on YouTube too.
Okay.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. If you want to write historical fiction, it's good to understand what you're doing to have a better grasp of it. I'm more of I'm not a research guy really per se. I like to tell a story, and typically my stories don't go into that kind of necessary research. But once in a while, you want to graze somebody with a shotgun, you kind of have to understand what you're doing. So I still need to edit that book. I'm hoping it doesn't come off as I didn't know what I was doing.
Okay, so what's the oddest thing you had to research?
Oh, that's an interesting question. It wouldn't apply to weaponry. I guess it would apply to more like setting a scene in the 80s or something like that, and you're wondering, like, did automatic doors, timers, coffee makers with timers, does some of this, because you don't want to put technology in there that didn't exist. All of a sudden you're using a coffee maker on a timer, and you're like, did that really exist back then? Was it invented yet? So then you have to do your research, and you find out that it existed in the 60s, and you're like, wow, okay.
Okay, yeah, I'm feeling old now.
Well, I'm just guesstimating that because I can't remember what I had found, but yeah, you find the most amazing stuff when you're doing research and stuff like that.
Okay, so you did mention a little bit about crimes of passion. Did you want to talk a little more about that?
Oh, that's probably my favorite, because the reason for killing isn't always there. Like crimes of passion, and sometimes crimes of passions are premeditated. You mentioned earlier, like, weirdest weapons. So many things come to mind that I've done. In the book Poplar Falls, The Death of Charlie Baker, the story starts with the detectives being in a room where they found a body tied to a bed. I won't go into too much details because it's kind of more for an adult audience, but basically it's got a pillow on its face, so the obvious murder weapon is a pillow. Now, you have to figure that's probably somewhat premeditated, but it didn't necessarily have to be, right?
Yeah.
Because the circumstance almost looks like it could have been, but was it? That's part of the mystery. So then you have to read on. That's part of my favorite part of writing, is the mystery. Not knowing and leading you on to try to get you to figure it out or reveal it at the end.
Yeah. But the impulse with smothering cannot be premeditated, but the actual act, you have to smother someone for at least 2 minutes. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, it's an interesting concept, and I'm disturbed the fact that you know the exact time that you have to smother.
Oh, okay. Don't be too disturbed. I actually watch a lot of forensic shows and true crime stuff, so I know the facts from them.
We'll hope that their research is good. Yeah, no, it's interesting because crimes of passion like that, like in that book, there's a few people that die in that book. It's not a book that's riddled with murders, but there's a few, and they're pretty much all crimes of passion. All the crimes. Now, there's some crimes that lead to death, some don't. Yeah, no, it's fascinating. But then you go to write something that's more horror, and you kill people. Kill characters. Like in Oakwood Island, the very first book of that series, there's a lot of deaths in that book, and I've actually had that criticism of like a lot of characters die. Yeah, they do. That was a book that was quite dark to write, and wrote that one with Angela again, and we've done quite a bit of collaboration, and it's very dark. There's going to be 3 books in that series, and it's not going to get any lighter. It's probably going to be pretty dark by the time it's over.
Yeah, well, I don't think that with a horror book that dark is necessarily a bad thing. And I mean, honestly, if you read some of the fantasy books, if you're talking numbers, I mean, they have epic battles that can kill thousands of people. I mean, a few
True.
serial killer numbers, I don't think compare to.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Yeah. But I'm not always wanting to write dark stuff. That's why I wrote a dark comedy a while back. I just finished a drama. The one I'm really looking forward to putting out is the one that's in the editing stages now. That's horror, but it's more of a lighter horror, I find. Because I'm not always aiming for super dark or super, but there's a few interesting deaths in that one too. That's going to be interesting. Weapon-wise, some of it's kind of, there's a bit of, I guess you could say, sinister forces, witchcraft, mobsters. It's quite a blend. It's an interesting book. I'm hoping people like it.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned a few things like ordinary objects used as weapons. So do you do that often, and do you have a favorite thing that you've used?
It depends on the circumstance. I think the pillow would be the most ordinary thing I've used, I guess. The lamp wasn't ordinary at all. You'll know that if you read the book. It's quite a unique lamp, one of a kind, and it made quite an interesting murder weapon. The bag of canned goods, although, kind of fits in there.
Yeah, it sounds like you've been very creative, though, so I like that.
Yeah. There is, I do really enjoy like the storytelling and the making, like creating all that, creating the characters, the settings, and putting them in those situations is absolutely fun. I try to have a variety of stories, not always singing the same song. It creates quite some interesting scenarios you can put people in, and it's not always about killing, but most of the time you'll end up with somebody dying at some point in a book.
Okay, well, I think we'll wrap it up here. And I'd like to thank you for being the guest. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you very much.
Words That Kill, we'll be back with another episode later on. And I hope you enjoyed this one. And bye for now.